I saw that you just like pulled a ruler out of nowhere earlier. I was like,
I got tired of drawing the shadiest straight lines the universe had ever seen because this thing, I'm not using a Wacom, people. I don't have that much money. This is sad something. Is not great. So
that's so funny.
ruler. But anyway, hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. So today we are going to take a look at Arjay and Bryn, and we're going to be talking about some kind of pitching things. It's kind of our focus for today. Maybe we should explain what we mean when we say pitching, because I know that there are kind of two schools of thought when it comes to talking about pitch.
We like to use the definition of pitch where it's just where on your foot the majority of your weight is, not your head weight. Somehow people hear head weight when I say that. No, I meant the whole body. Yes, your head is a factor, but it's your whole body. So where the majority of your weight is over your foot, whole body. The other definition that tends to get used is the forward and back relationship between your head and hips. So if your head is forward of your hips, you're forward pitched. If they're stacked, you're neutral. If your head is backwards, you're back pitched. And that is often used in conjunction with the term poise, which is the same idea, but between hips and feet. So if your hips are forward of your feet, you're forward poised, stacked neutral, back poised. And the idea being that a general sports stance, regardless of what sport you're doing, be it basketball or West Coast swing, your pitch in that definition is you're going to want it to be slightly forward a lot of the time. So your head is slightly forward of your hips. And your poise, you want your hips slightly backward of your feet because that just tends to free up movement in the human body really easily. The issue that we find is it is totally possible in that definition to be forward pitched, backward poised, but have your weight anywhere on your foot. And it's really important in West Coast swing to also know where your weight needs to be in order to function in the connection.
Mhm.
So, in general, if you're facing your partner, backward pitch, having the majority of your weight over the heel of your foot means you'll be in tension with your partner. If the majority of your weight is over the ball of your foot, you're going to be in compression with your partner. If the majority of your weight is over your arch, you are neutral and it's going to be harder to move around.
Yeah. And that's because when you are pitching, you're not putting all of the weight over one point. So you're able to uh kind of adjust and move at the same time. But when you are kind of all stacked over one spot, like midfoot, like it's really hard. Like you have to actually shift one way or the other in order to move because you're just straight up and down. Like your weight is going straight into the ground. It's not going at any kind of angle. When it's going at an angle, you can like push and then you'll move, right? So if my angle into the ground is like I'm angling backwards pitch, so it's kind of angling forward, then if I straighten my legs, I'm going to move backwards. If I straighten my legs and I'm squatted just right over midfoot, I'm just going to go up, which gives your partner nothing. Typically, we are using each other to work off of. So we want to be able to oppose our partner. So we don't typically want to be over midfoot. Obviously, there's circumstances where that's totally fine. We're not saying you should never be over midfoot or that, being neutral is bad. It's not. It complicates things and you have to make some other adjustments in order to make that work if
Yeah.
you're going to stay more neutral, pitched more like right over the arch of your foot. Um, so it makes things more complicated. You can do it, but a lot of people will adjust by like pulling or pushing with the arm in order to create some type of forward and back energy, if they're right over midfoot. And that creates a lot of other problems because then you're kind of separating what you're doing with your body. So you aren't going to be moving as one piece, right? So if all of my weight is going down into the floor, but then I'm pulling with my arm, we have two different directions. Right? Weight's going down, arms going back. So that is going to obviously not move as one piece if it's not already going in the same direction,
Mhm.
basically. And same goes for if you are trying to push to create that, right? All of that's going forward, but your weight is going down. So there are two different directions, and that it can work, but it makes it more complicated and it's a lot harder to kind of naturally oppose if there's any kind of other direction that you kind of get into, right? Because it's really hard to kind of have your arm kind of pulling diagonally if you need to do that, but you can pitch that way.
Yeah.
So it we're not saying that it's wrong, but it does complicate things to be over midfoot.
Mhm. And I would argue that understanding the basics of pitch creates a strong foundation for you to do that more advanced thing if that's something you want to incorporate into your dancing. But if you don't understand the basics of where your weight needs to be to create either tension or compression in the connection, you're going to have a much harder time doing the complex stuff because you're not standing on a solid foundation.
Yeah,
The other thing I really enjoy about thinking about where the majority of your weight is, as opposed to the forward and back relationship from head to hips and hips to feet, is that when you understand where your weight is, you can be more experimental with the shape you're making in your body while still being connected. If you're just locked into head forward of hips, hips back of feet, that can really stiffen if you're focusing on it too hard. Yeah, this is just another thing to help you understand. And a video I have shared with our students recently is actually from figure drawing, and it's about something called the line of gravity. And I'm going to go ahead and link to that video up in the cards above. And I would actually recommend to go watch that and then come back to this episode because it's a really great tool to figure out when looking at somebody. Either you have a paused video or you're watching your teacher live in front of you to be able to see where their weight is, even if they're not verbally expressing to you what their weight is.
right.
And the better you get at that, the faster you'll be able to see it in time and it'll actually impact your dancing in the moment because you'll, in addition to being able to feel or not feel some sort of connection, you'll be able to see where your partner's weight is like that and be able to act accordingly based on what you want to have. I will be using the line of gravity today as we're looking at our RJ and Bryn. So if, and I'll try to do like the layman's explanation while we're there, but I definitely recommend going and watching that video. I think that is, we did the juicy to the screen share.
The reason that I wanted to talk about pitch with this particular video, so Bryn does a really, really good job of managing where her pitch is at, but then also being able to still do all of her individual styling. And I find that a lot of times what happens with follows especially, but also leads is that when you're wanting to do your own individual styling, a lot of times you end up doing that, like, where you're over midfoot, but then you're pulling, and you kind of end up not giving as much to your partner, um, because of that. And it's not to say that you're not giving anything, but there's just less, and like I was saying earlier, it feels very kind of bisected, um, where they can feel weight, but they won't be able to tell where it's necessarily, because it's coming from like a pull or push rather than from where your actual weight is at.
So looking at Bryn first in this awesome intro, and keeping in mind that where you're pitching depends on where you're facing. In general, if you want tension, you need to be pitched away from your partner. And if you're facing your partner, you're over your heels. And for compression, you're pitching toward your partner. If you're facing your partner, that's over the balls of your feet. But when you are facing somewhere other than directly at your partner, that changes where over your feet you're going to want to be. So in this opening right here, as Bryn settles into her left foot, You can see I drew a line straight up from basically the middle of her standing foot. And you can really easily see that the majority of her body is on this side of the line, to the left of the line, whereas a very small amount of her body is to the right of the line. And that means her weight is pitched away from RJ, which is what is allowing tension in the handhold. We'll talk about RJ later. I can only multitask so much right now. And then they switch into a compression moment. And again, I drew a line straight up from the middle of Bryn's standing foot. And you can see the majority of her weight is over here, which is allowing for a compression to happen into, I believe, his ribs in this moment. And then holding forward again, RJ scrolls past her, and it becomes another moment of tension. And you can see from this image, because her left foot is closer to RJ and her right foot is way back behind her, she's using her left foot to create pitch. And you can see how pretty much all of her body, except her forward foot, is behind that line. And
Mhm.
as she moves forward, she's using that foot in front of her almost like a brace. And we talk about brace steps a lot for leaders, for example, but it's equally valid and important to understand how that functions as a follow. Um,
Mhm. Yeah. It functions slightly differently, but yeah, it does. It's still that breaking feeling.
yeah,
With the pitch and poise, like a lot of times you're just looking for certain positioning, and that doesn't mean that weight is going to be intentioned where it should be just because you're in that certain position.
yeah. And this is why I love we're going to be able to look at RJ today because he tends to dance with his head forward of his hips like all
Mhm.
the time.
Yeah.
But he is still getting pitched away from his partner in order to lead. And if all you're looking at is the like forward back relationship between a head and a hip when you're watching a leader that you're trying to learn from or emulate, you're going to miss where their weight is.
Yeah.
Right. Was there anything else from this section that you wanted to go over, or shall we
I
proceed?
think we can keep going.
Okay. So let's see.
Actually, I lied. I
Mhm.
actually want to talk about this right here. Uh,
Okay.
specifically because Bryn goes from being split weight under her own power to pitching where she is using that foot as a break. Um, and if she were to just stay weight 50-50, she wouldn't be able to give him anything in that moment. And it would be really hard for him to move her up over her foot. Because if you don't have that backwards intention to move forward, uh, it's really hard to catch on to that neutral positioning and shift that forward. Because you really have to create something, and that tends to be like almost a pulling feeling, right? And we don't want that from leads. But that does tend to be kind of the way that that ends up being adjusted to when you have a follow that is split weight. There tends to be kind of a pulling feeling
Mhm.
in order to get them to shift
Yeah.
somewhere.
Especially if the person who is split weight has straight legs,
Mhm.
because then they it's harder to under their own power unless you're doing that fancy like bring your feet together underneath you thing. That's different. That's a styling thing. Like if they were in plie, it would be easier to push off of one foot or the other. But when you're straight, it's much harder to use the floor to push to one foot or the other, which
Yeah, because you're creating a really strong balance point when you're
Mhm.
widening the feet, right? You're creating that really strong like triangle, and that's creating very strong balance point. Which I like to talk about how as a follow, if you're doing something and you feel like you're losing your balance, just to place another foot on the floor, and it doesn't have to be fully weighted or anything, but just even having another point of connection will really help balance that out.
Mhm.
So if we're creating that like in this type of moment, um, yes, we're balanced, but then we're not able to give our partners anything.
And then, do you wanna explain, like, how Bryn is going from split weight to bracing
Mhm.
off of her left foot, even though her right foot isn't necessarily moving right away?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what she's doing is just slowly shifting as her weight is rotating with the upper body. That's slightly shifting it forward because you can see like then she is ending up with more weight closer to that front foot. And so that's just immediately changing it where she's no longer like she kind of starts more over that right foot. But she does kind of get to 50-50 and then shifts through it. But either way, like she is using the placement of her body in this particular moment to help change where her weight is at.
Mhm. The other thing that's happening is as she's finishing letting her upper body face towards RJ, you can see her left hip, she's
Mhm.
sitting into it a little bit. So from RJ's perspective, she's shifted slightly to his right,
Mhm.
to her left, which is committing more weight to this foot,
Yeah.
even though it's out in front of her, which is creating that pitched back,
Yeah.
our preferred definition of pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one thing, for follows, a lot of times you'll see, higher level follows end up with that left foot in front and an anchor, and it's because that allows them to not continue moving backwards, um, as far as, like, space-wise, like, you're not shifting any further back, but you're still changing your weight, because your heel is going to then be in front of you, and so if you're shifting your weight onto that, then your weight is in your heel, and that is in front of you, so that angle is changed.
I know you touched on this in our preamble today, but I
Mhm.
just want to emphasize that it's by manipulating weight this way that is allowing their frames to be so relaxed
Yeah.
because the muscles in their arms and shoulders don't need to fire any extra amount to allow really stable connection to happen
Mhm.
because it's where their weight is. And just by nature of their arms being attached to their bodies, the
Yeah.
frames are doing what they need to do. You don't need to think more about bicep, tricep, shoulder.
Yeah. But
Mm.
basically, you really just need to have enough, uh firing in the arms in order to not let everything move away by itself. It has to have a little bit of resistance in order to stay in its proper positioning, but it shouldn't be more than that. And that typically does not take a lot of muscle like it does if you are pulling.
Mhm. Okay, you wanna now talk about RJ, and let's go from here. So he's just started to pass her, and she has just started shifting more of her weight to her left foot while still being pitched back. So, as RJ is starting to scroll away, you can see really clearly what I was mentioning before that he tends to have his head forward of his hips. And it's still true here. And he took this really big step right here. And what I want to highlight is he's moving with enough power that he's able to get to this position. So he still has his head forward of his hips. And yes, now his hips are backward of his feet.
Yeah.
But the thing that we want to be highlighting is so I'm going to draw a line straight up from what our perspective is, the center of that right foot. And you can see how the majority of his weight is to the left of this line, away from Bryn. And that's how he's actually able to lead her forward.
Mhm.
What tends to happen, and this is a note I've given a student recently, but I see so many leaders do this, is they get to here where their right foot at the end of their anchor is technically behind them enough that they're actually very forward pitched relative to that foot. And then they drive down into the floor and kind of forward. But because their upper body hasn't gotten enough over that foot, when they push into the floor that way, their butts, their hips go back and up,
Yeah.
leaving their head forward.
Yeah.
And they're still pitched forward, essentially. And then nothing is happening in the handhold, and the follow has no idea they're being led forward because they're not.
Yeah.
But RJ is making sure to actually continue moving his weight up onto that foot and past that foot in order to lead Bryn forward.
Yeah. And like he's still staying at that angled position with the upper body, but he's letting his foot stay in the same spot, but the rest of the upper body is still moving. It's just not angling different to move.
Mhm. So, my challenge, and this applies to follows as well, but particularly to leaders, especially leaders who love maxons. I love maxons. If you haven't watched that line
Not
of
everyone.
gravity video yet, go watch it. And then you want to practice drawing the line of gravity on your leader at the moment of foot strike at the end of their anchor triple. So, like if it's a 6 count pattern, like on count 6 when their left foot touches the floor for the first time. And then again at around 6 and where we're transitioning into the 1 of the next pattern. I want you to be able to see the line of gravity in those 2 moments. And you'll notice that even if their head is forward of their hips, the pros that you love are going to be pitched away from their partners. So the majority of their weight will be on the opposite side of that line of gravity from where their partner is.
Yeah. I want to add that like using the pitch and the poise, it can be helpful in terms of just like thinking what positioning you should be in, but you need to also include where your weight is going.
Mhm. And it's a great question to ask a teacher. Like if you're confused about their weight is and you have not yet trained your eye to be able to see it quickly,
Mhm.
just ask them and they'll tell you. They'll
Yeah.
probably be happy to tell you.
Yeah.
They might even be excited. They're like, ugh, juicy question. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we as instructors just kind of assume that you are aware of certain things, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you are. And that's not, anyone's fault. It's just, you know, we don't always include every single detail when we're teaching
Yeah.
things. We include the most important things. Generally, the other stuff kind of works itself out and does it on its own based on whatever instructions you're being given, but that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Um, so
And often, like, there's only so much time. And usually, a teacher's goal is to have the most students in a class be the most successful possible. And that will be how they prioritize what they're talking about. Uh,
mhm,
and it doesn't mean they're going to say everything that is necessary for something to function by nature of how dance teaching works or any teaching. You're going to be leaving stuff out
yeah,
all the time, always.
yes.
And like one of the other things that I see is how a piece of instruction, which is really great and relevant to a particular context, somehow students will take that as like the golden rule of thumb and they apply that to all of the contexts, but that's
Yeah.
not how it works.
Yeah.
So another great question to ask is like, so where are the contexts that this is applicable? And maybe give me an example of one where it's not.
Yeah.
Because, like, again, this is another thing where a teacher can't give you an exhaustive list of the applicable contexts and the non-applicable
Yeah.
ones. But a few examples can be helpful.
Yep.
All right. This is a really great example. RJ does an anchor styling that actually takes him into really extreme forward pitch, but he can't lead from that position. So he gets to here. I probably don't need to draw a line. This is extreme, and I think most people can see it, but I will draw the line anyways. So the majority of his weight is towards Bryn.
Yeah.
And he would have a hard time doing a body lead from this position. He would have to use tone in his arm in order to bring Bryn forward. But what he ends up doing is swinging his left foot way out in front of him, closer to Bryn, so that way he can end up in this position
Yep.
where the majority of his weight is away from Bryn, so
Yeah.
he can lead. So again, from the beginning, fun shenanigans,
Hmm.
adjust, lead.
Yeah. I also want to talk about what Bryn does because she kind of adjusts in an interesting way to what he's doing. So she is initially in this nice, like backward pitched, and she has relatively straight legs in it, because of the styling that she's going into, which is kind of like a little hip circle thing. Um, but then because he adjusts what side he's on, that kind of changes what she's doing. As she's twisting, she bends the knees in order to send more weight backwards for him. Because the way that she's like rotating, she's wanting to send her weight onto that left foot, but because he is now over to the right side of her, she has to shift that and get that weight in opposition to the angle he's at. So instead of like having to rotate her entire body and then press back, she just kind of squats and lets her body weight fall back in
Mhm.
order to get that opposition for the
Yeah.
weight.
When a Westie teacher tells you to sit into it or sit back, that's what they mean. It's not just about hinging at the hips and bending your knees.
Yeah.
You need to be shifting your weight away from your partner
Yeah.
as you do that.
Yeah.
Because, like, I can't even, what would a chair look like where you sit straight down instead of also shifting backwards?
I don't know.
Stool that you're straddling? Like,
I
that
guess.
would work. But, like, there's always a moment when you're sitting into a chair where you have to send your weight back past your heels in
Yeah.
order to actually get down onto the chair.
Yeah. And your head weight has to follow that.
Yeah.
So not to say the head weight isn't important. It is, but like typically we want the head and the hips to move together, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what happens is rather than the head and the hips moving together, if we're hearing, oh well, you need to sit back into the hip. Typically what happens is the head stays in one spot and the hips move back, which then just shifts so you're counterbalancing yourself,
Mhm.
rather than sending both the head and the hips back past the feet.
Mhm. 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 All right. Because you were mentioning the shifting sides kind
Mhm.
of situation. I wanted to do bird's eye view situation. So we have
Ah,
bird's eye view of the slot on this freeze frame. So
mhm.
this is Bryn, this is RJ, and the connection between them is not parallel to the slot, but it's at an angle.
Yep.
So the away energy here is in this direction. But now, because RJ has gone from here whoop, to here, if Bryn has gone from here whoop, to here, and the line of connection is now there.
Yeah.
So it went from here to there, here to there. So when we're saying away for tension, towards for compression, that doesn't mean it's parallel to the slot. It means away from your partner relative to whatever connection point you have, or towards your partner relative to whatever connection point you have. And the reason why in a basic we have this third foot position and we kind of go diagonally back and away is because our standard handhold is follows right, leaders left. And just the way physics works, that's how the line of energy translates through that handhold. And in a way, basic. But I'm rambling at this point. I've been rewatching Star Trek Next Generation, and last night's episode, Picard told Data's like, "You're rambling." I'm like, yeah, it's the reason I've always related to Data. Anyways, forward. Oh, this is a really cool detail. All right, I'm gonna delete that drawing that had too much going on. RJ is so pitched away from Bryn at this point that he only has to collect his feet underneath him, his left foot underneath him, to lead her forward. Because there's
Yeah.
already so much tension in the handhold. Like she is coming towards him. She is having to resist that energy because there's
Yep.
so much of it. Ugh. So that's where you get this like advanced footwork, scares quotes, where he just places his left foot underneath him.
Yep.
That's why that is allowed to happen.
Hmm.
If he were pitched towards her and just brought his left foot underneath him, she would not go anywhere.
And if she wasn't giving him enough, that wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Would not be able to do that because there wouldn't be any weight that he would get the resistance from. So he would have to move if he's not getting anything from her in order to like physically move her rather than using her weight.
Yeah. Ooh, I also want to highlight the length of her stride. So this is the other thing. Cause
Mhm.
like when we focus on form over function, and by that I mean at any given freeze frame in your dancing, is your pose correct? That's form. We end up disconnected from our partners.
Yeah.
So follow having a really gorgeous long stride to their count one is dependent on their leader leading that one.
Mhm.
If as a follow, you are just driving out of your left foot with a lot of power, regardless of what your leader is doing, you're going to be disconnected from your partner and you're also going to mess up the spacing.
Yeah.
And if you do that long enough with the same leaders over and over again, they're going to take these huge steps back on one without being connected. They're going to be pitched forward
Yeah.
in order to fix the spacing problem. But then you've got two people who are actively disconnecting from each other on both
Yeah.
sides.
We've talked about that concept before, and I've talked about it. The phrasing I used was that you get in front of the lead. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because you're no longer being pulled, your weight is no longer being moved. It
Mm-hmm.
is now that you are moving yourself rather than there's enough weight for them to actually move and pull you.
Yeah. Because, and this is where I think I may have only ranted about this in a comment in one of our recent videos because someone challenged me on the idea that this isn't just walking. And I appreciated it because uh, it made me come up with an analogy that I love. Yeah. Because human locomotion is controlled falling. We are pushing off of the back foot and extending our front foot out in front of us while our weight is kind of out in front of us. So our front foot is catching our weight, right? And that is with the intention of that foot then driving us forward again. So we're like pushing and catching, pushing and catching. And that's how walking forward works as a human being. Where it's important to know how to walk well is just so you're not hurting yourself. Like for me, I was locking up my SI joint apparently for 10 years. If anyone wants to hear that rant on a future episode, let us know in the comments. But in relationship to a weighted counterbalance system, that is West Coast swing, where you're either in tension or compression or transitioning between the two. It would, if you graphed it out, it would look like a sine wave. It wouldn't not look like a heart rate monitor. Please don't do that. That's how you get whiplash. Um, so back to the video. In this moment, Bryn is being led forward, but her relationship to this forward foot strike is to slow her momentum in order to be led again,
Yeah.
as opposed to just catching herself in order to move forward. Her intention is not to move forward again after that completed weight transfer because she needs to be led
Mhm.
for another one. The analogy that I used is a tug of war. So if you think of like really intense competitive tug of war, everybody is so pitched away from the opposing team that your feet are way out in front of you,
Yeah.
bracing against the ground. They are not controlled falling because if the opposing team were to suddenly let go, they would literally fall.
Yeah.
There's no control there.
West Coast
So,
Swing is not controlled falling, it's controlled tug of warring.
yeah. Oh my God. Can that be a shirt? Yeah. This may feel like splitting hairs, but it is so important to understand functionally what your relationship between your sending and receiving foot is. And just walking by yourself down the sidewalk, you have a different relationship between your sending and receiving foot than you do in West Coast Swing. And your relationship to those two things will change depending on what role you're in and where in a pattern you are.
Yeah. Because there are certain spots in your dancing that you aren't going to be solely relying on your partner. So like once we get through this anchor, right, it's there gets to a point where Bren gets up over her foot enough that she is no longer being pulled by RJ necessarily. She just already has a lot of momentum. So she's continuing and then he has to catch her and slow her.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a point where it we're not using our partners the entire time necessarily, but there's a follow through. And then we
Mm-hmm.
have to catch and redirect that. So there are points where we do, really use our own body movement, weight, whatever, especially for certain styling things. That's what a lot of follows end up doing is just using their own weight and not doing anything as far as giving to their partner.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as anchoring and that one, like you really need to be using your partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to highlight because when you were helping me improve my following, like when we
Mhm.
first started, one of the things you said to me was it's my leader's job to change my pitch
Yeah.
out of an anchor,
Yeah.
as opposed to me having the intention to do that myself. So I have the intention, and I believe from watching this particular section, Bryn has the intention right here to slow her momentum a little bit
Mhm.
as her right foot receives her weight.
Yep.
And as opposed to her being like, oh, I'm just going to move forward. And that helps me stay behind the lead, which is where the follow needs to be. And then tangentially, you can be pitched back or pitched forward and yet still be completely balanced and not need to hold on to something. So let me draw a scary foot and I'll do a foot in heels So it's easier to determine or distinguish between the heel and the arch of the foot. Ball of the foot, the arch, and the heel. You can have the majority of your weight be over the ball of your foot and not need to hold on to something. You can have the majority of your weight over the heel of your foot, not need to hold on to something. And obviously, same goes for the arch of your foot.
Yeah.
And that's what you can practice by yourself without a partner. And that's what you can do with a partner who is not, you don't feel like they will counterbalance you. But when you are with a partner who will counterbalance you, you can start sending your weight further
Hmm.
because your partner is counterbalancing you on the other side of it. It feels like one of the disconnects we have with this emphasis on form over function is we try to get the look of being past our feet,
Yeah.
even without someone counterbalancing us on the other side.
Hmm.
And that's exhausting. That's too much work.
Yeah.
And it
That's
actually causes a lot of pain depending on how
yeah.
you're going about that.
Yeah. And that's a lot of times where we get that hip being sent back
Yeah.
because the idea, right, when we are getting counterbalanced, our hip, head are behind the foot. But if you're not, it needs to still be over the foot, but back past that middle of the foot.
Mhm.
But it's going somewhere with that, and I don't remember where.
Okay. One of the exercises that Roro has done a lot is where you and your partner are holding onto each other with both hands. You both have chairs behind you, and the goal is to counterbalance each other down into a seated position. But that only works if you're actually taking your weight back past your heels. If you're keeping your weight over your own foot, especially if your partner is maybe larger than you. And then if you are like different sized people, the smaller person is going to need to pitch more
Yeah,
to counterbalance the larger person.
yeah,
And I'm not just talking height, I'm talking mass. You may look at a partnership where the leader is really tall and the follow is really short, and you're doing that line of gravity, and you see it's like the minutia of the leader being pitched away, like they might even be more towards the arch of their foot merely because their mass is so much larger. And if they were to shift their weight further, their partner might not be able to counterbalance it and they'd get yeeted into space.
yeah,
So there are instances where you play with this slightly differently just because of the mass relationship between you and your partner. Like
mhm,
if you watch old videos of Mario Robau and Marianne Nunez, Mario is a giraffe. Marianne is so adorably petite. Like he is shifting his weight back away from her. But because of that height, he's going to have a very forward relationship between his head and his hips, just to have his frame at a level that at a height that's comfortable for her. But he's still going to be leading her backwards. His pitch back will just be very small because you don't want to yank Marianne's arms out of her sockets. No, we don't do that.
yeah, yeah. I remember where I was going earlier with my point. So, because
Awesome.
you were saying that we try and get that positioning,
Mhm.
and I was talking about how if you're getting counterbalanced, the head and the hips are back past the feet. But if we are trying to get that positioning where our hips are back. A lot of times we're getting where we're standing up, head over hips, over feet. But then to get that positioning where the hips are behind the feet, we just kind of send the hip back, but the head doesn't go anywhere. And that
Mhm.
counterbalances yourself. And it gets a very similar look where you're being angled back behind your feet, but it's not actually doing anything because your head is still where it's at.
Mhm.
So you're
Mhm.
just kind of counterbalancing yourself.
Before I forget to say it. So when people say they can see connection,
Yeah.
elation, I can see connection. It is in large part because we can see where each person in the partnerships, where their weight is
Yeah.
relative to each other.
Yeah.
That's in large part what we're seeing.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. And if the math ain't mathing, you can tell it's like once you're able to see really quickly where each person's weight is and you understand when in general where you're supposed to have tension in a west coast swing pattern, where you're supposed to have compression, where you're transitioning between the two, you'll be able to really quickly see, are they in efficient tension, are they in efficient compression, are they in zero connection, it's just an illusion. They're just two people technically touching each other but not
Yeah.
connected with each other in any sort of functional meaningful way.
Yeah.
Or you'll quickly be able to see, oh, yeah, you can see strain in the arms, but you can't see their weight creating connection. So that means it's all arm lead. You'll be able to see that.
Yeah.
This is how. Okay. To Bryn, this applies to both people, but I want you to notice her foot strike on her right foot here. Come
Yeah.
back to me, ruler.
I saw that you just like pulled a ruler out of nowhere earlier. I was like, oh my
I got tired of drawing the shadiest straight lines the universe had ever seen because this thing, I'm not using a Wacom, people. I don't have that much money. This is sad something. Is not great. So
gosh, that's so funny.
ruler. But anyway, that's probably I'm gonna make that the intro to the episode.
I just noticed earlier you were talking, you were just like, ruler. And it disappeared.
I've been gesticulating with it a lot. Anyways,
Distracting.
yeah,
Couldn't think of what you were saying.
you're good. So, in general, a follows anchor finishes on their left foot, right? But if we're not thinking about pitch until that last step, we're probably going to get ourselves in trouble. So when Bryn strikes this right foot, she's already pitched back, which means if she were to land in a third foot position, which is basically what she does,
Yeah.
just slightly more shaped towards the audience, she's going to be pitched back. One of the things that can make learning how to anchor well when you're first starting is if you are forward pitched on the forward foot of your anchor. So for follows, that's your right foot. For leaders, that's your left foot. Then you want to transition to being back pitched on the back foot. Your center has to move through space further to make that happen. But if you are already pitched backwards on that front foot, all you have to do is basically put your foot underneath you when you're there
Yeah.
in that third foot position.
I was gonna add that so a lot of the reason that we end up talking about making sure our arm is opening up behind us is because we're trying to add more weight to that side of the connection because we have our arms already extended in front of us on one side. And so we want more weight on the other side. So we have to make sure that our arm is also back this way
Yeah.
instead of being like really flat. Like you can, but it's better to get more weight if you are opened and your
Yeah.
arm is also back.
Ooh. Yeah. If we were only to change one thing about her shape right now, like if she were to have this foot straight out in front of her, she would be closer to neutral than backward pitched because that would be more weight further away from the line. So distance from the line also matters. I remember. So for some reason, sugar tucks for me. I'm tall. Um, I get like led into the distance. I'm like seeking compression, right? I just don't do this anymore. But back in the day when I was learning, I was getting like my upper body was getting taken so far forward of my right foot that my left foot, I was like doing an arabesque behind me with my left foot in order to not actually fall forward into my partner. People would be like, "Oh my God, that styling is so cool." And I'm like,
It's
it's
necessity.
necessity.
It's survival instinct.
Yeah. So yeah, when learning about the line of gravity, understanding distance is also important. The further away from that line something is, the heavier it's going to be to that side.
Yeah.
And this is where head weight can be really relevant because a human head weighs a lot relative to other body parts. And the fact that it's on top,
Yeah.
where it goes, the rest of your body tends to fall underneath,
Uh-huh. In theory.
in theory. If you're clumsy, if I'm not actively thinking about where I need to be in space, i.e., if I'm not dancing, I'm a klutz.
Yeah. I feel like that's the case with a lot of dancers.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we dance because it makes us do it right. That tangent. Let's take a look at RJ in this same section. So he's doing something slightly different. When he first gets over this left foot, he's slightly pitched back.
Hmm.
He's a little more neutral. So you'll see him actually tuck. He
Yeah.
turns his right foot out a little bit.
Mhm.
So right, is that the right foot? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he hooks it underneath and behind.
Yeah.
So that way he can get to this position really quickly.
Hmm.
If
That.
he had placed it over here,
Yeah.
his center would have had to have gone all the way over here.
Hmm. Yeah. So when you're switching the weight from one foot to the other, uh, where your upper body is at is going to be relative to that. So if you're placing the one foot further in front and you switch the weight to that, even if your upper body doesn't move, your weight is now further back from the foot. This is the leader's equivalent of follows ending their triples with the left foot forward.
Yes. Like what we saw at the very beginning,
Yeah.
right here. Bryn's left foot is forward.
Hmm.
So while she got into it from more of a styling thing as opposed to just anchoring with her left foot in front,
Yeah.
that's
Same
functionally
concept.
happening. Yeah. One of the things that the best West Coast swing and any dance, this applies to any dance style, is having the muscle memory, like you've trained into your body to understand where your foot needs to fall relative to the momentum you have or don't have toward
Yeah.
that foot. So earlier I was talking about how this length of stride is happening because of how she's being led. She's not just aiming for that length of stride. And if you don't believe me, go watch videos of Virginie Grandin following Maxence versus following more lower level leaders. Because they do a lot of like pro am Jack and Jills over in Europe and in
Yep.
Asia. It's really cool. So you have videos of that. Her strides are shorter with the lower level leaders,
Yeah.
unless they're ones that are really driving through that one. What she is doing is she's feeling that lead. She's wanting to resist it because she's in tension. She's wanting to stay in tension because that's a follows job, stay behind the leader. So she is sending her foot way out in front of her, resulting in a large stride, but it's functional in order to resist her momentum forward.
Yeah.
She has trained herself. This is the amount of momentum I'm getting in the lead. This is how large my stride needs to be to get my foot in the right place for my weight to be in the right place.
Yeah. So the difference between follows that are doing this versus follows that are starting from like midfoot and propelling themselves is that here because her weight is back, she can stay with her weight back and reach the foot out to gauge how far she's going and then place rather than uh if you are starting midfoot and you're pushing yourself, you are catching. It has to be right underneath you. It can't be like really far out in front of you.
Mhm.
So it that changes stride length.
Yeah. And then I just want to highlight in this instance, so there's still tension until like this moment. Right around here is where the tension in the connection starts dissolving. It is
Mhm.
not dissolving here, which tends to happen if either the leader isn't leading or
Yeah.
the follow is overstepping
Mhm.
the lead. So, back to the generalization I was making, one of the things that makes the best dancers in the world the best that they are is they know where to place their foot relative to their momentum through space based on what they're trying to accomplish. Is this a master class? I think this is a
It kind of is turning into one.
and if you're still here with us, we would love to do constructive feedback on student videos. So if because we know that one of the things that makes this hard to learn in this context is we're showing you what the pros are doing. We're showing you what should be happening. But you also need to learn how to see when it's not working right. But we don't want to be giving constructive criticism to people without consent on this public YouTube forum. So if you are someone who wants some free feedback, because if you let us do it on an episode that's live on YouTube, we'll do that for free. We would love to also teach these same things in the context of constructive feedback.
Yeah.
Consent is important. It reminds me of that one episode we did where we're basically like drooling over Tatiana for an hour.
Yeah.
And then someone in the comments acted as if we were criticizing her. I was like, what? No? Where's what?
Yeah, because I think we were talking about how she's so good with working with like imperfection when it
Mhm.
happens. I think that's kind of what we were talking about in that episode.
Yeah, but that's describing the context in which she's in, not her response to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Here's another example of the length of Bryn's stride being dependent on RJ's lead.
Also, actually, this is an example where she isn't as pitched back going
Yeah.
into it. Uh she places her foot right underneath her, and that I think in part is due to RJ. He's like moving around her, so she's not entirely sure what angle she's going to be at next. So typically, when that's the case, it's safe to place your foot right underneath you. And then uh, the way that she retracts that foot and she sends the hip back, that's her moving her weight as far back as she can in that moment.
And then I highlighted her hip line for a
Mhm.
second to show how she's actually swinging her hips forward underneath her
Yeah.
to get her hips in between that front foot and her head. So suddenly her relationship to this foot is super backward pitched. So
Yeah.
this is a moment of her being in this position,
And
which is
correcting.
coming from a shaping thing she's doing. She's doing a fun shaping thing. And then correcting for it connection wise to be able to stay connected to RJ.
Because like moments like this happen where, somebody's doing something and they are moving and you don't know where they're headed, or like you're not exactly sure what angle you're going to need to be at, so you have to kind of adjust on the fly, and that's the type of thing that champion dancers are so good at, is adjusting even if things get not quite where they need to be at some point,
Mhm.
because he's scrolling past her, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is The camera tracking is making this a little bit harder to see.
Yeah.
But she is, even though in this freeze frame, she appears to be more 50-50, her hips were moving away from RJ to get into that position.
Yeah.
So even though she didn't necessarily get the majority of her weight away from RJ, it's more neutral. The momentum of her hips will create tension.
But then also she is uh correcting really quickly
Mhm.
by reaching and getting that foot out in front of her.
Yeah.
There's certain things that'll happen, like because RJ is scrolling past her, so she doesn't want to move one way or the other. Um,
Mhm.
so she's styling to, still do something as he's moving, but because he's moving past her, he needs to get further past her. She doesn't necessarily want to move forward.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah.
she just places it underneath herself, which is
Yeah.
fine.
She's waiting and seeking.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like, if this is what you're doing with your basic, it's probably not going to feel as nice for you. But, like, if you're doing this to adjust in the middle of the dance, that's fine.
Mhm. Yeah, look at how pitched forward she is.
Mm.
This is another one of those things where you'll see people trying to mimic it in form, but not actually in function.
Yeah.
And you can see as she's finishing her weight transfer to this left foot, the majority of her weight is over here towards RJ.
Yeah.
And where she strikes her right foot is even further behind.
Yep.
So right foot increasing the compression.
Yep. And because he's initially pitching forward towards her, that's what's moving him back.
Mhm. Yeah, because he is also very pitched forward. And that's an instance where he was allowing her to change his pitch. So, one of those analogies we hear a lot is how would you catch a raw egg, right? You want to absorb. There are two problems I find with that analogy. One, no dancer you're ever going to dance with is going to weigh as little as an egg. Uh, two, we absorb catching an egg to stop the egg moving. And in West Coast swing as our basic, we absorb to move or to redirect. When we're absorbing something, yeah, we need to resist it in order to cushion it so it's not
Yep.
getting a sudden brick wall kind of a
Mhm.
situation. But we're also taking that energy and doing something with it. We're not trying to end the energy,
Yep.
absorb it completely. Basically, what is happening if we're using, I'm going to use arbitrary numbers um, for like pounds per square inch of compression. Because in this moment right here, I have a picture for it. Bryn is compressing more than RJ. So there is more weight coming from her side of the connection than his.
Yeah.
He has the option to match that, but he doesn't do that. He provides less compression. So let's say she's offering 7 pounds. He's offering like 5.5. Because of that, he
Perfect.
will move.
Yeah.
And that's how he's moving. He is not intending away from her. He's
Yeah.
intending towards, but he's just not matching it. And because she is providing more compression, she will physically move him.
Yeah, and you can see that that's what's happening because his toes are coming up off the floor, which is what happens when, you're getting moved, not when you're moving yourself, you know?
Mhm.
Because they're coming up off before he's actually continuing.
Yeah, which is indicative he's not driving through the floor because you really have to drive through the floor in order to peel your heel off first. That's a
Perfect.
different episode.
Yeah.
Not um And so if we take that same math for an anchor, there is a point at which you are perfectly counterbalancing each other. There's this moment of like both got 10 pounds per square inch of tension away from each other. But then the leader then gives more.
Yep.
And that's what starts bringing the follow forward. All right, just going to highlight this for RJ. All right. All right. So on this foot strike, he's a little bit back, pitched away from her, but it's pretty close to neutral.
Yeah.
But he starts driving through the floor. And yes, his hips are traveling more than his head, but his head is still traveling. And actually, the important thing here is the pitch is relative to his right foot,
Yeah.
not his left. And so this is one of those things where if you're just taking him like blink of an eye, looking at him, you might draw a line straight up from like in between his feet,
Yeah.
in which case he looks a little bit more neutral, more counterbalanced.
Hmm.
But that's not what's happening. His left foot just happens to be touching the floor, but his weight isn't there because he's going to be stepping with that foot.
Yeah. And looking at that, like at speed, you might even think that his weight is over his left foot.
Mhm. But you can see right, like he's intentionally having his feet together for an aesthetic,
Yep.
but he can pick up his left foot. And now at this
He,
point, it becomes really clear.
yeah, he moves the left foot first.
Yeah.
He moves the left foot last and first.
Yeah. And then he takes this is an instance of him having a lot of momentum with his upper body and taking a smaller step
Yeah.
so that way he continues having the pitch this way
Yeah.
throughout those first two steps. A lot of our footwork, like our basic footwork in West Coast Swing, is actually designed to facilitate correct pitch.
Yeah.
But then we hear like disconnected piece of feedback over disconnected piece of feedback. It's like, oh, I need to sit. I'm practicing at home and I'm sitting away, but I'm
Yeah.
not holding on to anything. I'm going to be counterbalancing myself. There are all these like in general, what teachers teach is correct.
Yeah.
It's just that some context gets missed out, or like what the point is.
Yeah. The reasoning.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is like, think about it this way, which is helpful if you know what you're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Her sidestep into that kind of like lilt into her anchor right
Yeah.
here. Oh, so this is an example of her taking the basic idea of like transitioning into pitching away at the end of her anchor and making it pretty and doing a variation off of it.
Yeah.
So she does a bit of like a plie in order to take a really big step,
Hmm.
and she uses the floor here to kind of slow down her weight transfer,
Yeah.
and she just lets it keep going.
Mhm.
And then she gets here and she's so pitched away from him, and
Yeah.
so RJ is able to use this forward foot. This is one of those instances where he has the opportunity to push off the floor with either foot,
Yeah.
but he'll end up using this one to counterbalance her, and she's able to like just really sink into it
Yep.
and like
And she doesn't give him all of that weight right away. Because she is reaching, breaking herself, and then slowly moving into that really pitched away position, that gives him the time to counter. When follows like immediately fall into an away position, it's really hard for leads to uh, counter because it's hard to calculate that all at 1 second.
Mhm. Yeah. So pretty.
Yeah.
Summary? All right.
Yeah.
So there are two definitions of pitch that tend to get used. And there are more than just this one word in the
Yeah.
realm of dance that tends to have multiple definitions.
Yeah.
So if you're aware that there's more than one definition, you are allowed to ask your teacher which one they're using.
Yeah.
That they're using it, so you're on the same page. Today we're highlighting the different definitions of pitch. So the one that we like to use just means where the majority of your weight is over your foot, and it's
Or past.
away or past your foot. Yeah, and that doesn't mean where your head weight is. Your head weight is included,
Yeah.
but your whole body, where the majority of your whole body is. And you can learn about the line of gravity in order to start seeing that. The other definition is the forward and back relationship between the head and the hips. So if your head is forward of your hips, you're forward pitched, yada, yada, yada. And that goes in line with the word poise, which is the forward and back relationship between your hips and your feet. We like our version because it kind of simplifies things
Yeah.
and helps you really understand the foundation of this dance.
Yeah. There's less to focus on because with using pitch and poise, you have to be thinking about two separate things rather than just one thing. Um, and if you're thinking about, if you use the definition of pitch the way that we do, there's just one thing to be thinking about. So it simplifies it. Doesn't mean that you can't do the other. It just, there's more to think about when you
Yeah.
do.
So if you've ever gotten the feedback that your body is like disconnected from itself, like your upper body and your lower body are disconnected, it
Yeah.
might actually be really helpful for you to think about this type of pitch
Yeah.
because you're thinking about one thing that your whole body needs to do.
Yeah.
And that might help you move as one piece. And it also then, like at the more advanced levels, you can play with your shaping because you
Mm-hmm.
know where your weight is. And in general intention, you want to be pitched away from your partner. And in compression, you want to be pitched towards your partner.
Yeah.
You can practice pitching over all areas of your foot by yourself because you can be balanced over one part of your foot by yourself.
Yeah.
When you have a partner counterbalancing you, you can go past your feet. And we wanted to highlight this because it's just so sad. People try to get the look of that being
Yeah.
past your foot without understanding how it's created and
Yeah.
then working too hard.
Yeah. Then you have to start thinking about 50 different things at once.
Yeah.
And it's way harder.
Yeah. Another thing I think we've gotten this before because when we're helping a student, either one we've been working with a long time or someone new, the new one's tending to get really impressed, is we'll be like, "Do you experience pain here?"
Yeah.
And they'll be like, "How did you know that?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And usually it's because their weight is in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And therefore, their body's having to do something funky in order to do their pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. And when that happens repetitively, then you start to feel it.
Yeah.
If you're hurting somewhere, maybe think about that.
Yeah.
Not 100% of the time the case, but like 95% of the time,
Yeah.
usually it's because
Yeah.
there's something going not quite right.
Yeah. And I realized that we're like chronic pain people. So
Yeah.
it's easier for us to identify this is like, oh, that's a no pain.
Yeah.
Versus, oh, that's new.
Yeah.
Because like it makes sense if you're doing something new with your body. There's going to be some semblance of like discomfort or
Yeah.
your weak muscles
Mhm.
shenanigans. You might be sore because your muscles just haven't done that before, and that's fine. Um, pain, pain, bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually, I mean, if you're feeling like a sharper pain when you move in a certain way, that's usually a indicator that like you're probably not doing something right.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
Yeah. We do coaching. If you want any coaching, we would be happy to work with you. If
Yeah,
you want us to look over any specific videos, let us know.
yeah. And if money is an obstacle and you would give us the consent, we'd be more than happy to just do an episode on one of your videos and give you feedback that way at no cost to you. And if anybody's like, man, that sounds cool, but that sounds really embarrassing, like it would help so many people
Yeah.
and it would be so cool. And then you'll grow and you'll be able to see how far you've come. Having less skill in West Coast swing is not a moral issue.
Yeah.
There's no morality to it whatsoever. Even on the other, like, you're not a better person if you're a better West Coast swing dancer. That's not how that works. I've
You
seen
just
every
gathered more information.
I have seen every combination of skill and personality that
Yep.
you can think of. Means nothing. And if anybody gets like cruel, those they're not a good person. So yeah. That's part of the reason why we've been MIA is because we've grown our coaching practice
Yeah.
essentially in West Coast swing.
Yeah.
Um, and man, we love it. It's so much fun getting to have longer term relationships with students and to see them grow. And
That's
yeah,
something we recommend just in general, like, even if it's not, like, with us, it's really helpful to have a long-term coach to help guide you through, like, what should the next step be,
yeah,
uh, or if you're wanting to go take a lesson with somebody, like, what should you talk with them about, or who would be the best to go to if you're just wanting to work with somebody different and see how they teach or what they have to say, it's really helpful to have somebody to just kind of be a sounding board,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Um,
To get that consistency. And for someone who knows what they're doing to be responsible for putting your foundation together in a order that makes sense so you're not missing anything. I just still remember because like I came from solo dancing where it was very like regimented. You learn this and then you learn this and then you learn this.
yeah,
That's how you progress.
yeah,
And like, well, any given like community of West Coast swing might have their own progression. It usually stops at around intermediate, what the actual like sequence is. And then beyond that, it's just like, what's a pattern I haven't taught in a while because I'm tired of teaching this pattern in
yeah,
intermediate and advanced. And that's just in part because like in that group class environment, getting that consistency is hard. And like dance teachers rightfully have a right to earn a living. So they also have to keep that in mind. But I just remember it being my job in a private lesson to decide what I needed to work on.
yeah. Which is really hard if you don't have any guidance on that.
Yeah, yeah. Can only take away one thing, learn the line of gravity
Yeah,
so you can
very
see it
helpful.
well yourself,
Yep,
and then take that knowledge with you when you're watching the people you wanna dance like and when you're in lessons,
yep,
and it will help a lot.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Who knows when we'll be back?
We'll try some point soon. We'll see.